Hello and welcome back to Beckler Guitars and Repairs. Today we're checking out a classic vibe Jazzmaster in Sonic Blue. So there's a lot of hype around these classic vibe guitars, especially the Jazzmasters. I've been looking one for a while and I found one used that popped up. So let's see if it lives up to the hype. Here we are. So yeah, it's found a really clean example, and I went to go look at it, and yeah, there was it was nearly mint, and the price was right. So yeah, I picked it up, and yeah, these are pretty cool guitars. This one is called a Sonic Blue, so it's just a very slight, very almost white blue, a very light tint of blue. These were popular in the 60s. This is a 60s Jazzmaster classic vibe, and it's got some pretty interesting features. So I'm not too well versed in Jazzmasters. This is my first one. I've seen them before. I think I've played them a couple, but I've never owned one. And yeah, they're pretty interesting. So this thing actually has two different tone circuits. So the first tone circuit is the lead circuit. So in this position, it's kind of like a regular guitar. You've got three-way pickup selector, back pickup is the bridge, front is the neck, middle is both, and then you've got a master tone and a master volume. But then in the rhythm position, which is this switch up, it's just the neck pickup, and it actually darkens it a little bit. So it has a different sound in the rhythm position than it does in the tone position. And then you have a separate control for the volume and the tone of the neck pickup in that position. So that's kind of interesting. You can get some pretty unique tones out of this thing. And these are actually Alnico magnet pickups that Fender designed for this series, and they're supposed to sound really, really good. All the demos I've seen online sound great. So I'm excited to plug this thing in, see how it sounds. This has a Poplar body. It's got the old school Jazzmaster trem system, which is basically a floating bridge here. It's just basically a spring underneath this plate, and then that goes against the bridge here. The bridge is rounded to help with tuning stability. It's not quite a roller bridge, but it's got a rounded profile on the saddles that helps with tuning a little bit. And then our big wide single coil Alnico pickups, and this is Indian Laurel fretboard, but you could have fooled me because it's really dark. It really does look like rosewood, this example, and it feels like rosewood too. It's got really nice pores on this thing and nice grain pattern, so this is a really nice piece of laurel, and it does look a lot like rosewood. And there's our Squier Jazzmaster headstock. They do the tinted lacquer on the neck, so it kind of appears aged, kind of like a 60s wood. And then we've got our vintage style tuners that are the open slot that you put the string in to restring. I really like these tuners, they work really well. And then let's just have a look at the back. So yeah, there's a look at our neck with the tinted lacquer. We've got our skunk stripe, just like the Fender USA. And we can see that these are crafted in Indonesia. And the reviews and hype on these guitars are really high. Everybody has good things to say about them, and you know, for the price, it seems pretty wild, the quality that you get. So I think new these guitars are around $600 Canadian, and I paid substantially less than that for this one used. So there are deals to be had on these. Another cool thing is on the Fender USA's, they used the walnut insert for the truss rod. Usually that's reserved for the USA models. I didn't realize the Classic Vibe had that spec as well. The Mexican ones get the plastic, and yeah, usually that's reserved for the higher end USA ones. So yeah, let's go ahead and get some specs, and then we can take this thing apart and see what makes it tick. And then we'll plug it in and see how it sounds. Weighing in at a very comfortable weight, 7 pounds, 11.7 ounces. Just getting some pickup readings here. So in our bridge position, it's reading an 11.72. In the neck position, a 6.79, and in the middle, a 4.31. I just want to test the rhythm circuit now. So in the rhythm circuit, let's see here. And in the rhythm circuit, it's reading the same as the neck pickup, which makes sense, which is a 6.79. That rhythm circuit is just the neck pickup, but it's a little bit darker in the circuit, so it should read the same. A 1.62 at the first fret at the nut, and that beefs up to a 2.0 by the 12th fret. Another really nice spec on these guitars is the bone nut. So having a nice bone nut at a guitar at this price point is pretty great. And the depth at the first fret is an 8.45, and at the 12th fret it's a 0.916. Alright, here's a look at the neck profile. So yeah, just a pretty standard C, and it stays pretty C all the way to the 12th. As far as the neck feels, yeah, it's called a slim taper C, and it definitely feels a little slimmer. He's got a little bit of meat back there too, so it's not totally like a thin neck. It's more of like a narrow with a little bit of a chunk there. So a pretty standard 60s style Fender neck. One of the issues I bought this with, which was part of why the price was so good, is that the trem arm is stuck, so it won't pull out. It doesn't screw in. It's supposed to just fit in there as far as I can tell. And I've really yanked on this thing, but yeah, nothing seems to be happening. So I'm going to go ahead, before I do anything, I'm going to try to get this arm situation figured out. So I'm going to go ahead and take off all the strings, take apart the trem, lift it out, and just see what's going on. Yeah, it looks like it just pressure fit in there. There's a little collet here with a bolt. I might loosen that bolt and see what happens. Little persuasion, I was able to get the bar out. What I ended up having to do is take this bolt all the way out, unscrew it, and then take a set of pliers and then just kind of really reef on this thing until it came out. So I think the problem is that this is the wrong size for this bridge. This is like one size too big, so whoever had it before just forced it in there and only got it in about 1/4 of an inch and then got it really stuck. So I'm gonna go ahead and order a new size trem arm for this, and that should work just fine. Scratch that. I actually measured this bar with my calipers, and this is a 5mm caliper or bar, and it's supposed to fit in here. So what I did is, it just seemed like it was really getting stuck and it was really tight. So I took some lithium grease and I sprayed it in there, and now it fits a lot better. So I can push it in all the way and remove it without it being crazy. So, alright, all fixed. Alright, hit another kind of frustration point here. So this trem is covered in a plastic, and it's supposed to protect the metal, but you can see like little bubbles underneath it, and it doesn't look good when it's on. So I'm trying to remove it, but it's super on there. It's a lot thicker than any kind of plastic you'd find on like a pickguard, and it's really on there, and it's leaving a lot of residue, and it's just impossible to get off. Like, I'm using a lot of pressure, and it's just peeling and wrecking and ripping. And anyway, this is super annoying. I'm going to take some time to get it off, but yeah, I don't love that. Alright, this thing is a nightmare. So I've removed all the film, but now it's left all this residue, and Goo Gone's not really getting it off. I'm having to scratch against the metal, and then I'm scratching some of the metal while I'm doing that. And this little strip in the back that's underneath the bar was impossible to get off. It just kept breaking when I peeled it, so I had to use a razor blade. Anyway, I hate this thing. No joke, that took an hour to clean. There was just all these little residue everywhere, and the glue gun was not working at all. I just had to elbow grease it off. And I put a few small marks, scratches on there in the process. I was trying to use a pick and that was scratching the metal. So I just had to friction it off with a cloth and it took forever. So yeah, that wasn't fun. Let's have a look under the hood here. So, okay, maybe we should check out the pickups first. This looks like it's all kind of complicated. Putting it back together is going to be fun. I don't have a lot of experience with Jazzmaster, so this is kind of my first go. And let's see. Okay, relax. Okay, so here is a look at our pickup. This is the neck pickup. So it's labeled a JM, Jazzmaster neck, ADWH, whatever that means. And it looks like, there's the look at the pickup there. It's a big single coil. And in the back they have this foam padding. But what's neat about the foam padding is there's actually a spring embedded in there to help with the tension. So that whole thing mounts directly to the wood in the cavity with 4 screws, and then depending on how much pressure is on the screws, that shows you how high your pickups are going to raise or lower. So okay, let's get that back in there. There, okay. So there we are. And let's just quickly have a look at our back pickup. It's the same kind of a deal. This one is labeled the JM, Jazzmaster Bridge, ADWH. And then we can have a look at our controls here. So they're using mini pots, which is fine. Yeah. I think the only issue with mini pots is there's nothing to do with sound or anything else like that. I think they just fail more often than the regular size, so people don't really like to get in here and replace stuff. So they like to have something that's going to last. But personally, I have no problem with mini pots. They're just a cheaper part. That's all that can fail more often. That's all. And then it looks like they've got a high quality 3-way switch here. That looks like a Korean part there. And then we've got our switch and then our other circuit up here. Alright, here's a look at our neck pocket. So here's a look at our neck. There's no markings other than a little stamp. I think it says S10 or something like that. And it looks like there is a little factory shim in there. I don't know if that's, yeah, it looks like it's a tiny little shim. It's actually a little piece of sandpaper. So they'll put that in from the factory sometimes if it needs a little bit of a setup help. And then our neck pocket here. Here, let's go ahead and put that where it should be, probably about right there. And then our neck pocket just looks standard. We can see the wood underneath. The body material is Poplar, I just looked that up. And our neck pocket fits very nice and snug. There's not a lot of slop in there, which is great to see. Some even higher end fenders can have issues there. Here's a look at the bridge. So yeah, it's just kind of a rounded bridge to kind of probably help with tuning stability with the trem system. And then you can adjust your intonation with these screws that moves the saddle back and forth. And then there's just 2 little set screws in the bottom that you can adjust with an Allen key to raise or lower the bridge. And it just sits in these 2 little posts in the guitar. Just like so. Alright, just having a look at the neck here. So yeah, it's everything's in really nice shape. It's a little dusty, but no scratches or dings anywhere. I tried the truss rod, it works well. And as far as the condition of the frets go, They're a little old and rusty and oxidized looking. The grain on the Indian Laurel fretboard looks quite nice. It's kind of a darker grain than some of the ones I've seen. Some of the ones are really kind of dull looking and a little bit brighter. This is kind of a nice darker one. And yeah, there's a look at some of the frets are a little bit green from the rusting. That's kind of due to humidity or moisture. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the buffer and condition the fretboard. We'll see how it looks. And here it is after the fret buffer and polishing and conditioning of the fretboard. So yeah, nice and super shiny. And the fretboard really darkened up. It really looks like regular rosewood and not Indian laurel. So just a good piece, I guess. Okay, I've encountered a little bit of an issue on this guitar. I've got my bridge down as far as it'll go using those two little Allen key screws, but my action is still a little bit higher than I would like it. So the action, I just measured it, it's actually pretty good. It's about 1.5 at the low E and a 1.25 at the high E, which is totally acceptable. But it plays great, and there's no hint of buzz anywhere, so I think I can get that action lower. So the only way to do that is to put a shim on the neck. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So first you want to take a little bit of tension off the neck. So just loosen your strings a bit. Doesn't have to be much. And then for shims, I just have these little pieces of extra wood. Like this is a very tiny thickness piece of mahogany. So I just like to use this. I've got a bunch of scrap of this laying around. And then I'll cut just two pieces. So I've already got one shim in there now. So what I want to do is just increase that shim size just a little bit. So I'm probably going to get rid of that shim and then just put two additional shims. Now this is what my shims are going to look like. Just a little piece of wood. And then I'm going to stack them so they're twice as big. And that should alleviate my problems, because what that's going to do is going to raise the neck just a little bit closer to the strings, and then I've got a little bit more room on my saddle for adjustment. So I can probably, once I do that, I'll probably have to raise my saddle a little bit, but that's good, so I have the option for a little bit more room if I need it. Now I'm just going to take the neck off. Okay, and I'm just going to slowly wiggle it out of the pocket. And now, just being careful not to take away the tension off of the neck here, because if you remember that with those vintage style tuners, if I take too much tension off of the neck for string, all those are going to pop right out. So now I'm looking at the thickness of the original shim. The original shim thickness is about the size of one of my shims. So 2, I think, is just going to be just fine. And usually I have a set of scissors for this, but I'm just going to break them off to the appropriate length. And then I'm just going to put it right at the very base of the neck pocket, 2 stacked on top of each other. And then I'm just going to carefully put the neck back on and make sure that everything kind of stays where it needs to go. And yeah, let's go ahead and put it back on now. And by doing this, you can kind of experiment how many shims you need. Typically, you don't want to have like too many, because then it gets a little ridiculous. But 1 or 2 is usually fine. You can see already my action is too low. It's resting right on the fretboard. So that second shim really did exactly what we needed it to do. So now I actually have room to go ahead and raise my bridge just a little bit. And then we can adjust our setup from there. So yeah, that's how you install a shim. Alright, with the shims we were able to get a really nice setup on this guitar. So I'll show you what I mean. So I've got the neck set pretty straight with the truss rod. So if we just focus here, you can see that there's just a very thin amount of space between the notch straight edge and the fingerboard. That means the truss rod's set pretty straight. And near our nut, the action is quite good. You can see that when I'm using the 3rd fret, that the string's just resting nicely against that 1st fret. So that tells us that our truss rod's nice and straight, and our nut is cut quite nicely. So we've got nice action here. And yeah, the neck is never fully straight. There's always going to be a little bit of relief in, otherwise it wouldn't work. The strings would just be buzzing all over the place against the frets. So that's a little bit of a misconception. Even when the neck is set quite straight, there's always going to be some relief in it, even if it is just minimal. And here we are at the 12th fret, and we can see we've got an action of 1.5 at the low E, and just about, yeah, just 1 or a little under at the high E. So that's how I like to set my action. This is set up with 9-gauge strings, so the action is nice and low, and strings are pretty nice and thin gauge and slinky, so it's easy to play. And then the fret ends on this are super smooth. There's no sprout at all. And let's check to see if there's any buzz. So yeah, nice low action, no buzz or fretting out anywhere. And the frets are nice and smooth and shiny from the buffer. So yeah, plays great. Let's go ahead and plug it in and see how it sounds. Alright, I'm plugged into the One True King rig. Alright, that's enough of that. So yeah, we're plugged into the 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue. We got 4.5 for volume, 4.5 for bass, 4.5 for treble, and 2.5 for reverb. And I'm using the Carl Speaker Soak Attenuator. I'm going to start off clean, go through each position, and then we'll switch to some dirt. right, yeah, these pickups are awesome. They sound really, really great clean. I'm getting kind of a P90 vibe from them, a little bit different though. So yeah, they sound really, really, really great clean through a tube amp. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on some distortion now. So yeah, sounds great with the distortion as well, with a little bit of overdrive. The pickups really do take overdrive really well. It's that really nice crunchy, spanky kind of a sound. I really like the dark circuit too, the Jazzmaster circuit. It just provides a little bit more interesting kind of a tones out of here. I'm gonna go ahead and play on that one a little bit just to explore that a little bit more. But yeah, it sounds great. Alright, final thoughts on the classic vibe 60s Jazzmaster. Yeah, great. My favorite thing about this guitar was the pickups. They sound fantastic, clean or dirty in any position. I really like this rhythm circuit sound. It really darkens it up, but you still retain the high, so you get some really interesting tones out of this. And yeah, it sounds great in every position. I don't know if that's just a Jazzmaster thing or these particular pickups, but they sound awesome. Worth the price just for the pickups, really. If you can find these pickups, you know, after the fact as a part, I would definitely pick them up because they're awesome. This thing has really, really nice materials and specs. Like the Poplar body is great. The Indian Laurel fingerboard, it is really dark. It actually looks like rosewood. It's pretty indistinguishable from rosewood. It's dark, it's got nice green pattern, it's got the pores. So yeah, that looks like rosewood to me. So this example that I got had a really nice piece of laurel. You get your bone nut, which is awesome for this price point. Your tinted maple neck with the skunk stripe, kind of like a USA Fender, especially with the walnut truss cap there. And the trem system stayed in tune very, very well. The wiring was all good. You'd like to see some full-size pots, but I mean, mini pots are fine until they become a problem. And yeah, the fit and finish is great. There's no finish flaws or anything. This thing's also in really good shape. No marks or dings anywhere. It's almost in mint condition. The couple little problems I had with it was obviously the trem bar was stuck, but I think that might have been user error on the last guy who owned it. Just kind of shoved it in on an angle and got it jammed in there. Originally I thought that the tone bar was too big and he had jammed in there, but I measured it and it was the right size. So just a little bit of lithium grease fixed that problem. The other thing was the film on the trim plate, but again, that might have been just this specific example. This could have laid out in the sun and that plastic could have fused to the metal, making it almost impossible to get off. But we had a heck of a time getting all that off and getting rid of the residue. So if yours still has the film on there and you can live with how it looks, I would just leave it. Or hopefully you'll have a better experience getting that off than I did. The other thing was we needed to shim this neck. So at this price point, it's really hard to get a perfect guitar. And by that I mean it's really hard to get the action down this low because it's a mass-produced guitar. There's not a lot of hands on it at the factory. It's not going to be a perfect setup. So in order to get a guitar at this price point, great, you have to spend a little bit of time with the setup and stuff like that. And this was no exception. When the bridge was fully down, there was quite a bit of the action was quite high on here, so we actually had to put a couple shims in the neck, which is par for the course with Fender. That's just kind of how you do it. The higher end Fenders even have the micro tilt system, which is essentially the same thing. You're just increasing that neck angle to get a little bit better action. So with a couple shims, this thing was great. And then with the shims, it actually played really, really well. I was able to get the action nice and low without having to do any fret leveling or recrowning. I just did a polish and it was able to play with very nice low action. So that means that the frets were nice and leveled from the factory, so that's great. The one issue I did have was the fret ends. So they're sanded a little too far in at an angle. So the problem with that is that when you are using your high E string, that can slip off onto the angle pretty easily. So this one, it wasn't so bad that it was a big problem. I just had to adjust my playing style a little bit. If they were filed a little bit further, it would be a big problem because they would just be constantly slipping off. But this one's close enough that you can still play no problem, but it's bordering on being a big problem. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. Make sure you check your fret ends before you buy one of these. I don't know if that's just this specific guitar or if that's a problem across all the models. But yeah, if you can find one of these for a decent price, new or used, I would definitely jump on it. It's a really cool looking guitar. It's comfortable. It sits in your lap really well. The ergonomics are nice. It's got that belly carve in the back, and everything's nice and rounded. You've easy to access these higher frets too, which is nice. And yeah, this thing played and sounded great when I was finished with it. So yeah, just be aware that you might need a little bit of work to get it perfect when you get one of these, especially any guitar at this price point, an import guitar. But yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thanks for tuning in for Beckler Guitars and Repairs, and we'll have more for you really soon. Thanks a lot. Have a great one.